Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily Southampton, a part of the Global Sports Podcast Network. My name is Greg Elliott, and today I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Zach Finch. How you doing, Zach?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. Busy day, as always. Seems to be such as life in the 21st century, wherever we're now.
It is Wild Card Wednesday today, and we have another fantastically prepared episode by you, Zach. Zach, when you did your history degree, did you think that the best application you'd have for it would be a football podcast?
No. To be fair, most people that go in to do a history degree usually think I'm going to end up teaching. And about 20% of the people that I know did. And the rest of them were all doing really random jobs like me. I've managed to land myself in IT because I look like I work in IT, so I may as well just work in IT. And I use it to some degree in my job because of quote unquote critical thinking. But the research side of things, no. If you'd told me when I left that I would be doing research on, by the way, if you want to know what it's about, so our new group technical director, and using those skills for this, I would not have believed you.
Yeah.
But alas, here we are.
Well, look, I am very grateful for your skills and ability, and I'm looking forward to this. But before we get into your research, I do have one question for you. What is a group technical director?
Well, you see, a group technical director implies that it's essentially a technical director of a football club, but a technical director of the group. And obviously that implies in itself that everyone thought this was specifically a Southampton hire. It is a Sportsrepublic hire. But we'll get into a lot of that because a lot of my research bunny hops off the back of that as well. And yeah, it's going to be interesting. But basically what it means is that he is in charge of the footballing operations across the board. What that means for Rasmus and some of the conversations that people have around him and how the Turkish club is his kind of baby, who knows? Because a group director implies that they're in charge of everything that's going on across the clubs. And yeah, you're going to learn why we've hired this guy specifically, I think.
Okay, I can't wait. Let's get into it.
Rightio. So Johannes Spors is the new group director. He was previously linked with Newcastle before he was linked with us. So their journalism seemed to be the journalism into him when potentially he was going to take control of Newcastle was as a bit more than what's kind of come out since he's joined Saints, and even what came out in before him joining Saints. There wasn't a huge amount of information to kind of, for me to find. It's taken a lot of different sources. Some are slightly dubious, I'll be upfront when I come across those dubious sources. But yeah, he is somebody who they have definitely brought in to try and, I guess, save the situation, but somebody that isn't just going to be in Southampton. He has been brought in specifically to control the multi-club network that we are building. So yeah, head of football for the group, meaning Giuseppe and Valenciennes. I'm really bad at that. He starts work technically on the 15th, so he starts on Saturday against our game against Bournemouth. Technically,
not a derby.
Yeah.
Just getting that one in.
I didn't even mention it, mate. I said a game against Bournemouth specifically. He was already in attendance in the Dyer game against Burnley, and there's an article on the Daily Echo that Alfie House has done about what work he kind of thinks he needs to do. But I want to talk about who the man is, what information is out there, and what maybe we can see going forward. So he is supposed to be bringing a cohesive approach to football strategy, player development, and performance. That is one of the taglines of what he has been brought in to do. So I know that we kind of are hoping that he is going to be laying down the hammer on everything. But when we get into his background, you're going to start to realize that, he is mainly from a scouting and analytical background. And I think that's how he's going to be running the club going forward, or at least the footballing side of things. So he's actually quite active on social media, but the only social media he's quite active on is LinkedIn. And by quite active, I mean his last post was 3 months ago. but he consistently posts on there about the different things that he does. So he was speaking on a lot of panels across multiple sort of like football conferences. I imagine that this is where they found him, if I'm totally honest, because I remember like Rasmus and that lot banging on about attending these kind of conferences where it's like fantastic conference about the football transfer, blah 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 blah. Saw a talk of his about potentially multi-club ownership, which is one of the things he's spoken about a few times, and gone, we should probably bring this guy in. I know there were also rumors that we interviewed the technical director at Wolves, so I think this might be one of the things that kind of pushed him over the edge, is this ability to kind of deal with the situation that we have. So apparently he uses a very scientific approach to selecting targets. So I guess we'll have to see how that pans out. I feel like the way our transfers have been in most recent times, and I know that Wilcox was very focused on like domestic talent, and then there was whoever wanted and decided to pick all of the players from that they thought were good from the teams that went down. That's at least the strategy I see at the beginning of this year, and a couple of little gems in there like Matty Fernandez. So it's been difficult to get information on him, Greg, because like even from a standpoint of Wikipedia, he does not actually have an English Wikipedia page. So even if I wanted to get like baseline information, he only has a Wikipedia page in Dutch, which kind of shows you how behind the scenes he is and how a lot of what he has put out into the footballing world is, I don't want to say controlled, but it's not like he's a front and center guy. Like I very much doubt we specifically are going to get like a ton of press conferences about what he's doing.
That's good though. That's what we wanted, right? Just someone. It didn't need another public face. What we need is someone to do football stuff.
Correct.
And I've also found that Dutch Wikipedia page, and I haven't translated it, and I do not read Dutch, but I do see the word Timo Werner. So
yeah, well, don't worry. This is all here, and that is one of the ones where I'm quoting that the only thing with this Dutch Wikipedia page is it doesn't seem to have any sources listed for most of this information. So some of it could potentially be word of mouth or whatever.
Which just wrote it himself.
Yeah,
profile.
This is the other thing, is it does kind of feel like that. And one of the things we'll get into, we'll probably take a quick break in a minute, but I'll start with what he studied. And he studied political science and sports science. So he is a sports scientist. That is his original sort of choice, like trade, and started off as a video analyst for Hoffenheim in 2011. And within 2 years, rapidly raised through the ranks to become the first head of, become the head of scouting, which he stayed in for a couple of years. And then he moved to RB Leipzig, which is where a lot of this information that you've just got is. But we'll talk about
this
that.
Makes sense. This makes sense that we're getting. This is someone who has experience dealing with football from the technical perspective. It's not an ex-player trying to shoehorn his way into a technical or a director of football role. This is someone who's risen through the ranks in a different league, admittedly, with proven potential in that league that we're hoping transpires across the group. So it feels like a bold risk still, but at least it's like a bold risk in the right direction, right? It's not just let's put all of our eggs in the Russell Martin basket.
Yeah, I think when it comes to risk, judging by what he's dealt with so far in his career and what he has to deal with now, I actually think that he's going to be able to focus a little bit more, and I think it's going to be a good thing. But we'll discuss that a little bit more after our word from our partners at Zencastr.
Absolutely. So, here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr. Okay, right. So, what have you got for us next?
Yeah, so as I said, he started his first job was a video analyst at Hoffenheim before he went on to become head of scouting, which I think is quite the promotion within sort of 2-3 years, which must mean he did something right. And then he moved to RB Leipzig at the end of 2015 and stayed with them until very early in 2018. So whilst he was there, it was supposedly him that enticed Tino Werner and the Bayern Munich Dayot to play for the club. So that's some big names, and it was during his tenure at RB Leipzig they got promoted, and then after that promotion season got second place and also gave the club Champions League football. Obviously, you can't put all of that on his shoulders because he is, he would be the chief scout, but obviously selecting the right players to get into that position is, one of the things that would have resulted in them having so much success, right? We saw it with Leverkusen when, we thought Nathan Teller going to Leverkusen was kind of insane, and then they went on to have an unbeaten season. So sometimes the science pays off. Sometimes life gets in the way. Like you might have a player that scientifically on paper looks amazing and then breaks a leg. That's just life. But he seems to kind of live and die by this a little bit. So he then moved on to Hamburger SV from 2018 to 2019, where he was put in charge of transfers, scouting, and analytics, but left after a conflict with club management. So this is where I'm a bit like, I was unable to find any further details at time of recording, but that's never nice. But obviously, we don't know whether that's him not getting the support, or alternatively, him asking for things that they aren't going to give, them asking him, them getting involved. It speaks a lot of potentially needing that little bit of independence, right?
Yeah.
And that's the problem that I worry
He's
about.
a man who's not scared to share his opinion one way or the other, by the sounds of it.
Clearly.
Which is fascinating when you think of one of the videos that came out or came to attention when we assigned Ivan Djuric as our manager was him in a fight with a technical director, was it not? So
yes, this is one of the things that I'm thinking about because it depends, I don't know how much sway he's going to have over choosing the manager, depending on the things that he's being put in charge of. I don't know if they're going to keep that side of things, and then Sports Republic will have their little book of who they want to get in. I know a lot of people, including in the article by Alfie House, talking about sort of, oh, well, the manager question's still up in the air. And I'm like, well, it kind of is. But at the same time, in my head, if you've signed an 18-month contract, I know things can change. Do we really want to pay somebody out? And if I remember rightly, wasn't there a break clause?
I think it's madness to say that the vote on the manager is out when it's very clearly come out and been said that he's going to be our manager in the Championship. And it's clearly the fan opinion that he might go and might not be our Championship manager. But when you think that the fan opinion was to get rid of Russell Martin as early as it was, and the board opinion was not that, if you think they're going to get rid of Ivan Djuric in the summer, you are kidding yourself silly, and whether you like it or not. And I'm fine with it. I like Djuric, and I think it'll come good. But I think if you think they're going to make that change, you got nothing coming.
I'm not entirely convinced. I know that there's a lot of people. I think people are upset about missing out on Danny Roll. They really wanted him to be in charge for. I don't really understand a lot of the reasons why. Maybe the football that they would have preferred. Maybe the
affiliation with Saints in the past, mate. And it was
there's a lot of things that we have. We are very obsessed with our little period of time where we were flying high, right? But on top of that, the only argument that I would give against that is that if he is being put in charge of footballing and he is being given free reign and he turns around and says, no, this guy isn't going to suit the long-term plans and he's not going to suit the transfer targets that I've picked and they're not going to play to their potential under this manager, I could see them maybe changing their mind at that point because they have made all of these decisions without the consultation of a technical director. And this is there are a lot of clubs that do it without sort of that kind of insight. There are a lot of clubs that do it with it. It is becoming a far more popular thing, especially as this kind of multi-club model grows. I could easily see a scenario where they get to the end of the season, he makes a decision and basically pushes the board, and then the board have to decide who do we care and like more, the current manager or this technical director that's meant to overturn the side. And depending on, it's really hard to know what decision they would make, but at least from a financial one, getting rid of somebody, unless there is that clause where they can break his contract after 6 months. Yeah, it'll be interesting to say the least, because what it means is that there will be probably a different sense of direction. I do wonder if it means that if Djuric doesn't do well in the Championship early, whether they go on to replace him earlier than how long they stuck with Russell Martin. That's one of the only other things I think.
Possibly. Also, I think, bearing in mind both appointments are recent, and since the realization that we were in the situation we were in, it would be really crazy if there wasn't some level of compatibility between the two signings.
Agreed. But also, it's having that trust that Sports Republic are learning from their past, and currently we're hoping that that is going to be the case. But there are a lot of vocal voices and a lot of people that, understandably so, are worried that it could turn out that way. So we're just going to have to wait and see. But I think that having somebody in charge of that side of things when we had Wilcox for a bit and then he left, and more importantly, it fulfills the Sports Republic role of dealing with their multi-club approach, right? Like that's one of the big things that I think that they have hired him for. So after he left Hamburger, he went over to take control of Vitesse in 2020 until 2021. He stepped into sort of a director of football role there as well. It was one of the only weird things they spoke about was that the entire club at one point were hit with like 8 or 9 people coming down with coronavirus at the same time. So they kind of had to do a bit of shuffling when all of them were out ill. Again, could be a mistranslation. Again, also could be BS. Just thought it was interesting to put in there. That was just a random thing that they decided was worthy of note. So after he left there, he went on to become CEO, so Chief Executive Officer for Genoa. And then later...
That's interesting.
So this is when he kind of moved. So he's moving around technical director role. But then he later got promoted to the role of Global Sports Director, which is funny because now he's Group Technical Director. Again, I'm not saying that all of these are just random job titles, but they are. Ultimately, what it means is he was put in charge of the footballing operations for the 777 group, which are the group of clubs that Genoa were a part of. So that included the Belgian side Standard Liège, which a little bit of Saints trivia, I'm pretty sure that's where Gineppo left from and went back to.
Isn't it also where Bazunu's gone out on loan?
I believe so. Yeah, actually, you're right. Red Star FC, Melbourne FC in the Australian League, Vasco da Gama, which I'm probably butchered, in the Brazilian League. This is also the same group that managed to or tried to buy Everton previously. They weren't able to buy Everton. Everton were not successful they were not successful in their purchase of Everton. Everton was obviously been purchased by they've been purchased now. I can't remember, but they were the first ones that tried to put a bid in. He's also previously worked with Ralph Ragnick, who previous former Manchester United coach and now Austrian manager. That was just a nice little bit, nice bit of tidbit there. But during his tenure, what is important to note is during this sort of global period, Genoa got promoted back into Serie A, Red Star got promoted, and the Brazilian team also got promoted. So, if you're looking at his time at clubs, bar the little gap after RB Leipzig, where he kind of moved across quite a few football clubs quite rapidly, he has had good results where he's worked, right?
It sounds like exactly the sort of success in exactly the business model that Sports Republic are after.
Correct, right?
And we will go into that a bit more after a message from our partners at the Global Sports Podcast Network.
The Global Sports Podcast Network is changing the face of football podcasting with dedicated daily content for every Premier League team, women's football, fantasy football, and a daily Premier League wrap-up, broadcasted in 5 different languages. This is your one-stop shop for your daily football fix. Find GSPN wherever you find your usual podcasts.
Okay, so we are back. And so you were going to elaborate on how you felt about his success at the same sort of structure that Sports Republic are aiming for.
I think it's important because first and foremost, he is a fan and somebody that has been heavily involved with the multi-club approach. Now, I know that is a thing in modern football, not a huge amount of fans are, happy about, right? You saw it in, I remember sort of first paying attention to it back in the days when City also owned NYFC or whatever they're called, right? And then Frank Lampard went on loan because there was that weird period of time where Frank Lampard was a City player, which Seems to skip everyone's mind. But then obviously he got to go out and play in the MLS. There's a couple of sort of indicators. There was a lot of controversy in Newcastle with similar sort of stuff, with them potentially sending players over from Saudi Arabia and vice versa, or alternatively Saudi Arabia buying players really, really cheap and then immediately loaning them out to Newcastle to play in the Premier League. And arguably we are kind of doing that on a smaller scale. How many appearances did our Polish goalkeeper Matthias Liz actually have at St Mary's? None, to my knowledge. I think maybe he had an FA Cup.
I don't think any at St Mary's, but I do think he played in a pre-season friendly.
There you go.
Maybe at the Silver Lake.
So like he was entirely a transfer that came through us that ended up at Gostepi, right? And then you've also seen some development loans where Matsuki, for example, who I'm very much looking forward to eventually seeing. He was a big player in the J League, so whether or not he ends up coming back to us, apparently the players that we have that are on loan there are on loan to develop and come back to Southampton, right? We have taken one of the players, Joaquim from our French sister club, and we've brought him into. So we are already kind of doing this stuff, but the idea is that if they can grow it properly, it can be something that's both successful in football and successful financially. And he has a track record of being, successful both in football and financially. But on top of that, I don't think that he would have had the interest from a club as big as Newcastle, who also have a similar model or a multi-club model, if it wasn't for him having the accolades and of doing it successfully. And that seems to be sort of his area of expertise, on top of the fact that he's also just quite a good scout. So bringing all sort of a data-driven scientific approach, but also being able to manage the expectations properly, means that hopefully, like from their perspective and an ownership perspective, they'll be able to kind of bring all these things in rather than having such a disconnect, which we've got currently, where they're kind of laughing it up and clapping happy over in Turkey, sending messages out, and then kind of over here not ignoring the situation but reacting far too late. And then with the French club, the first season they took it over, they got demoted. Same with us, right? So they having somebody as like a kind of anchor to potentially build this model into something they actually want, and who actually has a footballing background, can only be a good thing. And with him coming from a multi-club like model that had 5 clubs in it, that's now shrunk down to 3, and we are hopefully very much considered the crown jewel. But what it might end up relating to is that, depending on how finances go and other things go, I wouldn't be surprised if in the future they start to acquire maybe another club here or there. That was always kind of their intention. What that means for us, I don't know. It's difficult to say, but like, I don't think you would bring in someone with this level of expertise on specifically that, unless if your plan was to kind of just sit on it, right? Or it will be a simple case that he helps develop the football across all 3, and we actually get to get use out of this multi-club system, because at the moment it doesn't seem that Southampton itself has really benefited from it, right? And that's the problem, is we are not Sports Republic fans, we are Southampton fans, and it's hopefully finding a way of like keeping that identity. And maybe that is one of the reasons he's not as public with the way that he does things, because again, if you're going to football conferences to speak to specifically technical football people in the background, and you're not really getting involved with, I guess, the fan culture side of it, it speaks to how his mind will work. All I'm hoping for is it brings some sort of stability, it brings some sort of plan, and it brings, some sense of positivity. And with any luck, he won't get poached after 6 months, right? Like, I'm really hoping they learn their lesson there. But
it sounds really promising. The thing with multi-sports and multi-team models, right, is that it's all about building for a sustainable future, and you don't always see that straight off the bat. And especially with Sports Republic, where, let's face it, they've got some stuff wrong at the start.
A lot.
It's hard to come back from that, but let's hope that they manage it. And this seems like a step in the right direction. We've cried out for a football person to do the football stuff, and this screams of that. Not only a football person, but a football person that seems compatible with our owners and the way they want to do things properly, instead of them just guessing the way they want to do it properly and assuming that whatever stats they had in their background worked. Which good.
And like he's a spring chicken by the standards of footballing as well. He's 42, so he's not that old. Like he's got a
Baby.
big career ahead of him for something like this. But like I think that showing his career trajectory from video analyst to kind of chief scout to technical director to then all of a sudden being put in charge of, going when you're in charge of one club anyway, and then they get promotion, and then all of a sudden you're in charge of tons of clubs. It's very much he's kind of showed that he's got accolades, and I don't think that I would prefer, I guess, someone solely concentrated on Southampton, but like it's not. It helps bridge that gap with what the ownership want and expect, right? Rather than having to try and figure out what all the people are doing at the different clubs. And also, it means that there will be consistent attention on the footballing and the results, right? It's a results-driven business at the end of the day. They are starting to realise, and will probably realise, the cost of going down. Yeah, I'm sure parachute payments help out, but it's better to be in the Premier League than not.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Absolutely.
And hopefully this means now we're going to get some sort of direction to head back and head to it. And, it's not about necessarily the managers as much as it used to be, I think.
It's about structure.
And I do think that it's important that we all recognise that, and we see that this is an opportunity, and that I think they've brought in somebody that actually knows their stuff. And it remains to be seen. The jury's still out, but like where I'm at is doing all of this research. I feel a sense of positivity. I don't want the next Tino, Werner, whatever. That doesn't bother me. But what does excite me is the fact that he has built in most of the places that he has been, or been a part of something that has built in all of the places that he's been. If he is some sort of fraud, he's been very lucky to just slot into teams that have then accidentally got promoted multiple times, right? So
it is a good track record with huge promise, and let's hope that translates up to this level, and that we can look forward to what we were talking about the other day, and in 10 years' time be winning the Champions League.
Exactly that. And
that's what I'm taking from it.
Perfect. So on that, just a quick thing about sources of information, misinformation. I use quite a few extensive. There's the transfer market website that has his entire career history. I did use the Dutch Wikipedia as well. There have been multiple articles. There have been lots of. He has a LinkedIn. His LinkedIn's public. If you've got LinkedIn, you can go check it out. That's where he has a lot of the things about. He has lots of different videos on him speaking about multi-club ownership. I'm not going to pretend that I haven't read them all. This is a daily podcast. I also have a job. So like I can't spend all of my time, but I did put a significant portion in. So yeah, take it all with a pinch of salt. A lot of it's going to be journalism, but some of it is directly from the man himself. So yeah, I hope that at least it gives people an understanding of who he is, as opposed to the tagline that has been released by Southampton and the BBC Sport article that really annoyed me, where they have his name as Johannes Spors, Sors, and in the article they have it as Spors, but they've just never corrected the title because it was like a breaking news story and they just added nothing to it.
Perfect.
So that's all the information I could get. I hope everyone's learned something. It gives me a little bit of positivity towards what could come in the future. And maybe if Sports Republic don't get it right, at least maybe they've hired someone now that might. So
fantastic.
Is that the positivity we need going in for our not derby?
Yeah, mate, this was a fantastic episode. I love it when you teach me things that I don't know.
Maybe I'm a teacher after all.
Putting that history degree to the use it was meant to. I think there's an Egyptologist joke somewhere about a pyramid scheme, but we won't go there.
No, you're fine, mate. I've heard them all. My current boss, as you well know, did not realise that I had a degree until 2 years into my job and was like, "You've got a degree," which says a lot for how often managers read CVs. Yeah. But I'll leave that.
Right, well, thank you very much, Zach, for preparing that. It was wonderful.
Thank you for
thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I hope that you feel enlightened and educated and optimistic off the back of that research. I certainly am. So let us know in the comments what you think. Are you looking forward to winning the Champions League in 10 years' time? Let us know. Can't wait. We're on X, Blue Sky, YouTube. We're on the Global Sports Podcast Network YouTube channel. Check us all out, all of the other football podcasts on there. There's a whole wealth of football content for you to devour. We're on TikTok. We're on Instagram. Give us a rating on Spotify. Leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts. Thank you very much. We will be back tomorrow with our crossover episode with Bournemouth. It's not a derby. And look forward to seeing you then.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.